Bubba Stallcup is the CEO, president, and founder of Love Thy Nerd, a ministry that lives out the mission of being the love of Jesus to nerds and nerd culture. Through his 12 years of experience in vocational ministry, serving on multiple church staffs, Bubba has developed a deep understanding of the unique needs of both those inside and outside of church communities. Since 2012, he has been on a mission to connect with people through the world of games, comics, conventions, and pop culture, sharing the hope and love of Christ in spaces that are often overlooked by traditional ministries. With a heart for reaching others where they are, Bubba has made it his mission to build bridges between faith and nerd culture. Please welcome Bubba Stallcup to the NCMS stage.
Anytime I'm talking to somebody about what I do, I make sure to start with the fact that we are actually nerds. I think that's really important. A lot of times, Christians come into spaces and we drop VBSs in foreign countries that work in America that might not work in their space. And then we wonder why it just kind of dies when we leave. They really look forward to us coming back, but there's no sustainability when we're gone. So what we're trying to do is to say, hey, we are actually in this space. Each and every one of us loves something different. You might be into Dungeons and Dragons, or you might be into Magic the Gathering, or Baldur's Gate 3, or whatever your nerdy thing is. There may be something that you just absolutely love, and we want to help you understand you can do that with the cause of Christ in mind. And you should. So let's step back, and I'm just going to skip across the top of the cultural timeline here. We're going to talk about some things. I might talk about the thing that's your area. I might not talk about the thing that's your area. This is not an exhaustive list. It's just the one that I've got. Dungeons and Dragons, all right? How many people play Dungeons and Dragons in here? Look at all these nerds. Just every last one of them. I often will tell people D&D it's not my thing. It's not for me. I have capacity for about 2 campaigns a year. One-shots. I have 2 one-shots a year. I have that capacity. And even then, I'm not even in character. I'm just watching everybody else around me. It's like an experience, like VR kind of for me. But Dungeons and Dragons, it comes onto the scene in 1974. All right? I'm going to give you guys a lot of dates and numbers and stuff, and I'm not putting them on the screen because I don't really want you to remember those. I just want us to live in this moment here. Comes on the scene in 1974. By 1977, it began to pick up steam as they released the advanced D&D rules. 1997, Wizards of the Coast, God bless them. Wizards of the Coast picked them up. In 2014, the 5e rules were released, and so since 2014, we've all lived in a better Dungeons & Dragons universe, which thank you for that. It used to be wild. I've heard about what it was like when 1e and 2e were it's the Wild West. In 2017, 9 million people watched other people play Dungeons & Dragons online. Thank you, Critical Role. All right? D&D finally reaches its all-time height in popularity thanks to the television show Stranger Things. And I would say if you're in this room and you haven't watched Stranger Things, there might be a couple of reasons why you haven't. If you were able to, I think that it is required watching for a nerd culture ministry. Teaches you a lot. How about Magic the Gathering? How many MTGers we got in here? Planeswalkers, yeah. So that was designed in 1991. Some of you may not know this because of Dungeons and Dragons. It was the openness, the open-ended but dreadfully written D&D rule set led to the creation of Magic the Gathering. Okay, it was also picked up by our good friends Wizards of the Coast in 1993, and they averaged by 2022 they averaged about $1 billion annually in sales. From most of you in this room, I'm sure. Absolutely. And I mean, so many other things coming out of Magic the Gathering. You've got the whoops in the room. You've got a lot of things that come from Magic the Gathering. You have video games. You've got a lot of extra worlds that have been created out of that. Speaking of video games, this is probably the biggest and widely known part of nerd culture. It may not be the largest, per capita. There are a lot of people that play D&D in their basements and just never talk about it, but a lot of people will tell you about the game that they're playing, okay? The video game. So let's take a trip down memory lane for video games. In 1972, Pong was first commercially released as a video game, and it was the first actual success commercially of video games. It wasn't the first one. You got to go way back to get that one, but it was the first commercial success. The industry then crashed in 1983 due to the issue of quantity over quality. Yeah, I'm looking at you, E.T. And so, but then in 1985, Nintendo steps up and just saves everybody's bacon. Single-handedly saves the video game industry with the release of the NES. Okay? And that was a big deal because that led to a lot of extra stuff as well. As of 2020, here are some interesting figures. The video game industry boasts revenues over $159 billion with a B. You're going to figure out just how big that number is in 1 second. I promise you that. But here's something that I think is even more remarkable than the revenue number is that 48% of the video game numbers is mobile. In the U.S., we don't understand that at all. You get outside of the U.S., it's a lot of mobile. It's a lot of mobile, right, Jamie? Like, we're talking to our guys in Brazil all the time, and they're like, just, why do you guys have anything but a phone? You know, everybody's playing on their phones. So 48% of the world's video game population plays on mobile. Might be something for us to think about. As of 2024, the video game industry's revenue is estimated to be as high as $455 billion. That's a pretty big jump from the previous number I just gave you of, what was it, 159 to 455? Let's understand how big that number is, okay? Because this is going to tell us kind of where culture is and where it's going. The music industry, as of 2023, $28.6 billion. Okay, we knew that number was going to dip with the advent of streaming music and all that stuff, okay? How about the cinema industry, movies? As of 2024, an estimated $79.2 billion. The television industry, okay? This one's the largest one. As of 2021, that was about $210 billion. And Netflix, which I think is just an interesting one to throw into this because it takes so much of our culture with it, $9.8 billion. If you combine all of those numbers, you come up with $327.6 billion annually in revenue. That is still $127.4 billion less than the video game industry. All of those combined. I could add more to that list, and it still wouldn't reach. $127.4 billion is a big number in and of itself. And that's just the gap between everything else that culture is telling us is the thing. Friends, Taylor Swift is in that music number. Right? That's kind of a big deal, okay? We're doing things in a space that is easily the largest space of any of the recreational cultural spaces that exist. The video game space specifically. Esports made its way into the Olympic picture in 2020, largely due to the pandemic. But we've seen a rise in things like the Olympic Esports Series, which took place just last year, and in 2023. And what they did was they actually handed out bronze, silver, and gold trophies to winners in categories like dance and shooting and all sorts of things. But these things were, I got them right here, Fortnite, Gran Turismo 7, and Just Dance, as well as virtual chess. On the Olympic stage. It's kind of okay to laugh at that, if I'm being real. Like, I have a hard time seeing chess as an Olympic sport myself, but even in that moment, I've got to check that against where culture is actually going. The Olympics, as an entity, has grown since its inception to what it is now. If they saw people, throwing darts as an Olympic sport, they would roll over in their graves. But here we are, doing a lot of things that we didn't set out to do because that's where culture is going. So, it's important for us to know that some of the largest entities in the world are actually moving into the esports and video game space. Number one, chief amongst them being Saudi Arabia. Okay, Riyadh is going to be hosting the Esports World Cup, basically from here until you are not on this planet anymore. They're just taking it over. They're rebuilding entire cities so that they can have esports events there. Jamie, you're going out there, right? You're going to go check this thing out? Yeah, going to try to. And so, like, it's an interesting time to be alive, where it's not just us sitting in corners of basements or dimly lit rooms. It's people on the grandest stages in the world saying, we're going to throw everything into this. Everything. Like big money into this space. And that's just, friends, that's just video games. Let's talk about anime. Yeah, anybody like anime in here? Woo-hoo! Yeah. Anime is another area where I'm trying really hard to get into it, okay? Like, every time I step into it, I'm like, I just don't even know where to start. Like, and they're like, oh, just start at the beginning of this 12-year, series, kind of a deal. And I'm like, well, I got things to do, right? Like, I got to watch my kids grow up sometime. And so, but let's talk a little bit about anime, because anime is one of those things that is sweeping not just the nation, but the absolute world. We were in Paris not too long ago, and the culture in Paris is very, very anime. Like, it's taking over a lot of things across the city. And that's not a place where I would think in my brain that I would find that, but it's all over the place. So let's take a little trip down memory lane. So anime, or Japanese animation, dates all the way back to the very early 1900s, okay? And it looked nothing like it looks now, at all right? It had no real style or anything. It's just a way to move into animation, early 1900s. Manga and Japanese animation then converged in the 1960s. I thought this was interesting, with Astro Boy thrusting it into popular culture. Astro Boy, of all things. I never in a million years would have put Astro Boy on that list. The 1980s saw a series like Gundam start to take root. The late 90s benefited from the bubble economy, okay? Huge, massive economic bubble there of the 80s, and gave birth to things like Ghost in the Shell, Cowboy Bebop, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, just to name a few. Like, a lot of these things that you guys have, like, bed sheets and underwear for, like, came out of this boom in the early 90s. The 90s also saw an increased, like a massive hype jump in interest in anime from the rest of the world. It started to bleed out. You got to understand the 90s. Anybody remember the 90s? Just barely, maybe like 3 of us, right? Like, it was a wild time. I mean, you had to get things imported. Like, the internet wasn't, it was just a figment of our imagination at that point. So when you got something that was from a distant land, like, it was kind of a big deal. But then how do you have one copy of it? How do you get it out to everybody? There was no, like, mass distribution channel yet. But as those things start to come in and start to get shared around, this Western audience starts to grow a little bit with it. Then we fast forward to about 2003, Spirited Away. Yeah, Studio Ghibli? Giblets, Studio Giblets. I've heard it both ways. I'm being real with you. So I just charged head forward into it in a room full of nerds. That was a good idea for me to do. But in 2003, that's our full-length feature anime that hits, and it's just wild success. I mean, don't take my word for it. Literally talk to anybody who actually knows anything about anime. I mean, Asia, I've heard you say it several times when people are like, oh, yeah, I'm thinking about watching anime. They're like, hey, you should watch Spirited Away. And I'm like, is that the one about the horse? I can't remember. It's not the one about the horse, just in case you're wondering. I promise it's not. But then you fast forward, you've got, in 2021, a little show called Attack on Titan was the most in-demand. This was wild. I could not believe this when I read that. It was the most in-demand show in the world. In-demand show in the world. And by 2024, Jujutsu Kaisen, did I say that correct? Yeah, Jujutsu Kaisen. It broke that record by taking that title and smashing the Attack on Titan record with an average global demand rating that was 71.2 times higher than Attack on Titan. What? That's wild. Already the top of the mountain, the most in-demand thing is an anime. Something else comes along and blows it out of the water. Now, I'll be real. I have tried to watch Attack on Titan, okay? I tried to even do it the right way, with the subs, not the dubs, okay? And I got about one episode in, and I was like, I don't know, I have no idea what's happening. I can't see anything that's happening on the screen. It's going too fast, and I can't read that fast. Then I turned on the dubs, and I was like, this is a subpar experience. I'm going to step out altogether. And so my hope and my goal for 2025 is to watch one more episode of Attack on Titan. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's the least I can do for all of you. How about the movie industry? All right, we talked about that. In 1984, this is just nerd culture stuff related, right? Movies go way back. But in 1984, Revenge of the Nerds starts to shift this cultural zeitgeist about what it means to be a nerd, right? If you remember that movie at all, it was very nerd stuff, right? Like it was super nerd. But about 3/4 of the way through the movie, it flips. And that was weird. And then all the rest of them come out and the nerds are on top and the jocks are on bottom. And it's this cultural shift that nobody was ready for. But it kickstarted a lot of really cool things. I mean, in the 80s and mid 80s and early 90s, we get to see things like a lot of sci-fi and high fantasy and stuff like that comes out, and like movies that we might want to watch that are not just maybe like all war and gore, right? If you're into that, that's totally cool. But like some people don't want to just watch that stuff. We want a little bit of variety. We get introduced in 91 to Terminator 2, Judgment Day. And the world gets to see what it's like to be controlled by time-traveling robots. And that literally, I think, changed so much about how movies were made from then on. It introduced people to that kind of stuff even after Terminator 1 had come out and nobody had seen that movie. T2 introduced a lot of things to people. Marvel legitimately kicks things off, if we're being real. They kick off their cinematic universe in 2008. That just feels too far back, right? Like, it was just yesterday when they started and Iron Man came out. Nope, it was 2008 when that came out. And they really changed the way that people talked at work, the way they interacted with their friends, the kinds of conversations that we had in secret were now coming out in public. And we were talking about things like, well, I don't know, man, like, who could really lift Mjolnir, like in the MCU? That's a really weird thing. And then we saw Captain America have it, and everybody lost their minds, right? Like, it was just, then Vision had it, and it was just, everybody was holding it after that. But this idea that Marvel changed the landscape, it's not just what we might perceive as popular. The stats post the same thing. Did you know that 8 of the top 10, the list changed. 7 of the top 10 movies of all time grossing are nerd culture movies. All time. Let's just look at them real quick. You may not like these movies, and that's totally fine, but everything still stands. Avatar, okay? Not the Airbender, the blue ones, all right? Avatar. Yeah, just so we know where we're at, all right? Avatar, that's number 1 overall. Avengers Endgame, number 2. Avatar Way of the Water, number 3. If you've not seen it, it's not as bad as you think. Just do yourself a favor, go watch it, okay? Number 4 is Titanic. Number 5, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Again, you may not like these movies, okay? But doesn't matter. Hey, whoa, hey, this is my time, Mark. Don't start a riot here, okay? But that was, I mean, if you guys remember, that was like, hey, Star Wars is back. Like, nobody knew anything. It was the excitement of the moment. And so that's number 5. Number 6, Avengers Infinity War. Number 7, Spider-Man No Way Home. Number 8, Inside Out 2. I could make a strong case for Inside Out 2 being a nerd culture movie. Number 9, Jurassic World. And number 10, Lion King. Yeah, right? Yeah, I could make a real big case for Lion King. It's the cartoon, not the live action, just so everyone knows. Okay, yeah. But I think that we've pretty well established that nerd culture is kind of at the center of culture in general. What we have seen to be on the fringes for so long is now in the middle. But it's not always treated as if it is. But you can only push something off to the outside and the fringes for so long before what's in the middle is actually not the popular thing. And so where I'm saying we are the hub, we're at the middle, culture's pushed us to the outside. And not just us in this room, but us in every room. I mean, I frequently have conversations with people where I'm talking to them and they're like, oh, yeah, I like that thing. Like, I've known you for 10 years. How have you never, ever said anything about that? Or what's even worse is when, I'm nobody to a lot of people. I walk into a room and I start having a conversation with somebody and I'm talking about the things that I love and care about. And they're like, oh, yeah, I like that. And the person next to them who has known them for 10 years goes, what? When did that happen? They're like, oh, yeah, my mom made me a Michelangelo birthday cake and it was all downhill from there, That's my story, by the way. But I think that we made a pretty strong case that there's a need for nerd culture ministry. And I'm not necessarily just saying it for you in this room, because if you're here in this room, you understand. This is a lot for the people that are going to be watching this later, to understand this. This is for you guys to share with people who don't necessarily understand, and they think it's just this cute little thing that you do when you're bored. That's not it. It's not it. This is a thing that brings so many people life and joy and passion and acceptance and understanding. And we cannot stand in the way of it and go, yeah, it's stupid though, right? Why would you spend so much time on this stupid thing? So where's nerd culture ministry right now? A lot of it's in this room. I mean, a lot of it is in this room. But not all of it. So what I want to do is I want to kind of help you guys understand some of the ministries that exist, some of the people that are out there. This is not an exhaustive list. If I do not talk about your thing, I promise you it is not because I don't think that it's worthwhile. I just only have so many minutes on the clock to talk, okay? But we want you to understand these things so that you can get involved in this stuff, things that resonate with you, things that you want to be involved with, things that nobody's going to have to motivate you to do. You're going to get out of bed in the morning and go, I got to tell somebody about this new anime. I got to have a conversation with somebody who cares about this thing. And my hope is that you'll want to have conversations with people that think differently than you do and believe differently than you do, because we're not trying to create any kind of echo chamber. It's good. It is wonderful. It is beautiful for us to have like-minded people that we talk to about the things that we love, and that's great. And when we can do this in faith environments, it's fantastic, but this can't be it. It cannot be it. If it's it, you're not in nerd culture ministry. You're probably not in ministry at all. You're in a group. And maybe that's fine, but that's not what we are encouraging and calling you out into. And I don't believe that's what God is calling you into either. So this summit, the collective in general, is about growth in ideas, growth in partnerships and numbers and influence and all sorts of stuff. And awareness, just to understand that these things even exist in time and space. So we want to encourage you to do that. The easiest one for me to start with is Love Thy Nerd. That's our organization. And yeah, thank you, Whoops. Whoops in the chat, yeah. And so I don't want to hover here too long, which would be very easy for me to do. Very easy. For any of us that lead organizations to just get up here and tell you about all the wonderful and great things that we do as an organization. But I want to brag on some other ones. I just want to let you know that we as an organization do 3 major things. We focus in these areas: thoughtful content, relational outreach, and intentional community. The top 3 ways that we do that, thoughtful content, is our website. It's got podcasts. I mean, thousands of hours worth of things for you to get lost in. I've not even consumed all of it. It's out there. Relational outreach, we go on mission trips. We're going to have a round table tomorrow. I want you, if you're interested in missions at all, to sit down with Luke and talk to him about what it looks like to be on mission in nerd culture spaces. And then intentional communities, which is what you all are probably the most familiar with everybody, which is just, hey, how do I sit down and actually talk to somebody who does or doesn't believe the same things that I do, but we have common interests. We may be wide apart on other things, but man, we can sit down and talk to other people about, Agatha all along, right? Whatever the thing is, we can sit down and talk about those things. So, let's talk about a couple other things. Lux Digital Church. Mark was up here as MC. You'll see him a lot more. They are a digital church. It's in the title, so that's how I know it's true, right? They're an online. I say only. Are we doing only or primarily? Where do you want to land on that? I'm gonna say only. You're not up here. Lux Digital Church. Yeah, big banner right over there. And they utilize Twitch on Wednesdays for their services. And they also utilize Discord for the continued fellowship in between, after, during, all sorts of things. They're also active in mission work both inside and outside of digital spaces, which I think is fantastic. And you'll hear more about that later. They've got a killer D&D ministry. Oh my gosh, it's so good. It's a shared world. It's so good, LTN stole it. Like, we just took it. And you should steal it too. It's fantastic. They're pioneers in this space and others, and just creating these learning environments like NCMS. They're not a digital campus. They are a digital church. And I think some people that are watching this later might need to hear that. That's not what we seek to create, is just digital campuses of these physical spaces. There are a lot of people that will never go to a physical church. Some of them will, but most of them won't. And they need spaces in the digital that are geared towards them. So if you come to the Lux service, you'll see that. You'll see that it's very digital focused. Even though you're sitting here, they could not care any less that you're here. It's about the people that are watching online. And that's their aim. So Mark and anybody else from their team would love to talk to you more about that. How about XP Church, or as I like to call them, the artist formerly known as God Squad. It just recently had a name change, which I think is sweet, dude. Like, I haven't had a chance to tell you yet. I think it's awesome. I think you're absolutely right. It speaks more to the culture and the people that you're trying to reach, and it talks about not staying still, but about growing, because you want to gain XP, right? Like, that's the whole point. They're Pastor Susie and Amanda are doing a fantastic job out there. They started with God Squad as the first ever church for nerds. You're welcome. I don't know where else to go from that. A lot of the stuff that we have in the space comes from ideas and moments just like that. And so, Matt, thanks, man. You and Amanda, appreciate you guys. Yeah. Their vibrant community has met in person and online. They were in person for quite a while. And they also do, squad cons. I don't know what you're going to call them now. Yeah. More on that later. Stay tuned. But they also have true and authentic salvations and baptisms in physical and digital space that are happening. All these digital churches are doing that, and it's wild. They've got Discord. They've got small groups. They've got 2 services that happen on a Saturday. That if you're just puttering around on the internet on a Saturday and you need something to do, XP Church. Check them out. And Matt would love to talk to you more about that, about everything XP Church. How about Geeks Under Grace, man? Where are you at, Cody? There he is, right there. Yeah, they do just like faith-based reviews on pop culture things. It doesn't have to be more difficult than that sometimes, right? Like, that's what they do, and they're really good at it. And they're working on what the next stage of it looks like for them, for Geeks Under Grace. And so I think that encourage them, talk with him if you want to be more about that. If you're constantly reviewing stuff, Cody's your guy. Beneath the Tangles, over here. That, it's just absolutely amazing, the stuff that they're doing in the anime space. And in that, Jesus Otaku as well. There it is, in the back, yeah. And so, there are tons of people that are moving in the different spaces that you are like, man, it'd be really good if we had something that was this. It's already there. It's already there. We got things like Go Game with my guy Jamie over here. Go Game is a global gaming and esports movement. When I'm like, hey, you going to Riyadh? That's a normal question to ask Jamie. Where in the world are you going to be next week, right? After this, he's going to Orlando. And then after that, probably the moon. Who knows? Yeah. Sky's the limit. And so That's a global thing. He also does satellite gaming, which is a really cool thing that shows kids that they can learn and play and have fun in these environments. And it's faith-based. And he's so good at it, schools and baseball teams are inviting him and his organization to come out and run these events. It's not just churches, man. Like, this is, when you move out and you move into culture where culture actually is, what you'll see is that some of the people that are vehemently against the things that we believe kind of give way a little bit because they see the impact, the positive impact in the space. You can mess that up. I promise that you can. But if you do it correctly, you'll find yourself in some of those spaces. Nurch is out in Germany. Yeah, they're doing like legitimate events for nerd culture people, and they're also hanging out with like the Nintendo Club in that area, and the president of the Nintendo Club of Germany like comes and hangs out with them regularly and is a part of their events. They're doing home church and all sorts of stuff. Like, we got to go and be a part of that when we were in Europe, and it was just amazing. We're standing around and there's like, what was it, like 50 or so people there at the launch event. And I'm asking him, like, oh man, how many of these people are Christian? And Philip's like, I don't know, you and 3 other people, like, okay. How about all the people that like got up and spoke and played the harp and said how great this event was and invited people? And they're like, no, they're not Christians. I was like, okay, well, what about the guy that translated everything you said for me and for Matt so that we could understand? And he's like, nope, that guy's not a Christian either. I was like, well, I bet he is now. That dude preached the gospel to me. There are like a billion other things across the world that exist. And I'm telling you guys, you need to get involved in something. Even if you're an organization, you need to partner with somebody else that is doing it. It can't just be you. If it's just you, it will fail, and I promise you that. We see it time and time and time again that people set out with good intentions to do something, but they don't have the staying power. They just die. And it's sad because you look at that like, man, that would have been really great. God could have done something really wonderful and special. That reaches into a space that I never could have. But it didn't have the legs. So I'm encouraging partnerships. I'm telling you, like, I'm not doing anything that I'm not doing myself. I'm leading by example here. LTN, like, we are going to continue to exist due to partnerships. Right? We cannot continue to do everything ourselves. We've got our hands in a lot of different pots, and we can't do it all ourselves. So partner. So where do we think nerd culture ministry is going? I think that we're in full swing, right? Like, does anybody feel like we're kind of not like doing well in some areas? I think that we're in pretty good. We could use a lot more money in the stuff that we're doing, right? I stopped apologizing for ministry costing money a long time ago. It's just a thing. To be able to travel here and stay in a castle and live indoors and eat fresh food, like, that takes money, right? And so I think that those kinds of circumstances aside, I think we're doing pretty well. Churches are starting to come on board and understand some of the things that are happening, which, to be fair, was one of the last dominoes I thought was going to fall. I thought it was going to be the biggest holdout for the church to finally understand. But let's look at a couple more numbers I think this is why the church is falling in line. So globally, the number of Christians on the planet, now these are estimates, okay? Number of Christians on the planet. Currently, as of 2024, the estimate is 2.6 billion people. Okay? The world's population is 8.2. All right? So it's around a third-ish. Not a math major, but it's around a third-ish, right? The number of unique people who play video games globally, these are like hard numbers that you can look at a computer and just copy and paste into an Excel spreadsheet. Those hard numbers are 3.3 billion people just playing video games. So the church can look at those numbers and go, there's need, there's a gap, there are people in our own neighborhood that we're not reaching with our local church. So how many more are we not reaching online? How many more are we not reaching because there are people who can't identify with the thing that you find joy in life and peace and understanding in. We have to be able to equip people to go into those spaces as missionaries to love and serve those people. And so, we're no longer in the shadows. We're out in public. People are seeing us. It's geeky chic and nerds rule the world, right? Like it's just the thing. And I think we saw the craziest thing at the end of October when the Catholic Church released their mascot. And it was, how do you say the name of this mascot? Luce? Luce, okay. L-U-C-E, Luce. Little chibi anime character, right? And this was it. They did it like, the post came out on like October the 28th, and it was really right before Halloween. Take that, Satan, kind of a deal. And so they said that it was done in an effort to live even within the pop culture so beloved by our youth. That's a statement from the Catholic Church. Now, I'm not standing up here and saying, hey, since the Catholic Church did this, maybe here's some other things that we should be doing. I'm not saying that. It has not really been, it has not been a movement of progress for us to follow what the Catholic Church is doing. I'm not making any statement. I'm just saying, like, if we stay in one spot, they're very stalwart, right? Like, the Catholic Church doesn't change very often. So for them to make this massive movement into culture, how many of you are like, that's going to end poorly, Catholic Church? It's, hey there, fellow kids, throwing a skateboard over your shoulder kind of a deal. Memes are fantastic. The memes are great. But, like, actual impact, I was like, whoa, boy, this is not going to end well. It's about to get real hard for me to do what I do in this space. But it was received very well. I was surprised. People are making memes about it, but how does that not propel you into the center of the cultural zeitgeist, right? That makes you popular. That makes people want to follow those things. And so what I'm saying is that if the Catholic Church can do it, I guarantee that we can do it. We just have to be bold in the spaces that we're in, to step out and say, no, this is important. This is something that I think that somebody who's in this space needs to hear. They need to understand, like with Luce. Like they just need to be able to see a thing that they like associated with something that they have immense amounts of disdain for. And even that little piece of representation changes an entire mindset, starts a conversation, creates a gap where you can talk to people about things. And so, I think that we can do that. By being here this week, whether you know it or not, you're a part of that movement that is like directly 100% focused on looking people directly in the eyes and telling them that the things that they love matter because it matters to them and they matter to God. And it shouldn't matter if they know the difference between Power Rangers and Super Sentai. Those people are still people that God loves, cares about, and died for. We got to stop drawing the lines. We need to look into spaces where people are hurting. We need to look into spaces where people are actively engaging instead of standing in our spaces and yelling at them to come to us. We need to go into those spaces and tell them, hey, Jesus loves you, and I really like to play a game with you. I'd really like to watch this anime with you. I'd really like to read this manga. I'd really like to do whatever it is that you want to do because I also want to do that thing. But what we can't do is step into spaces where we have no desire for those things and tell them that they should like the things that we like or that I'm the expert in those things, because I'm not. D&D and anime, I promise you, I'm not the experts in those two areas. And so I don't step into those spaces and pretend to be. I step into those spaces and I let people teach me things. Hey, you really like this anime. Why? Tell me why. I would like to understand why this was a game changer for you. So we need to do that. We need to push the hate aside, kick it all the way off. And we need to embrace love. Love of people who think differently than we do about any number of topics. I mean any number of topics. You can fill whatever you want into that bubble. any number of topics, kick it off to the side, and be able to sit down with them, love them well, and understand their story. Because I'm telling you right now, the people that we deal with in nerd culture, the people that we do ministry to in nerd culture, they have a better reason for being outside of church than most of you have for being in it. That is a hard truth, and I'm sorry. But it's where we are. It's where we are. And I want you guys to understand that it's our responsibility to fix those wrongs. If you get nothing else out of this talk, take this phrase with you. Hey, it's not my fault, but it is my problem. I may not be the reason you hate Jesus or the church or whatever, but man, that is my problem. My goal by the end of this conversation is not to change your mind, but it's about to help you to understand that you're loved by the creator of the universe. That's what I want. That's what I want for everybody. They can do what they want with that information, but we have to be able to get to the point where people understand that just because we believe in Jesus doesn't mean that we don't care about them, because they don't. That's missions 101. Moving into spaces where people hate the God that you love and loving them well in those spaces. So I've got hey, Matt, will you bring my phone up for me, please? I left it over there. I left it in the bathroom. I left it on the table. I guess the whole thing. You left it on. We turned it off. Oh, no, I need it on. Yeah. Oh, great. Okay. I'm not doing things, I'm not calling you all to do things that I'm not willing to do myself. And so I want to show you a conversation that I had online. I don't recommend getting into conversations with people online about a lot of things, but I think that there are some times where we can have conversations with people in digital spaces, because that's where they are. They're living on Facebook, they're living on X, they're living, on whatever platform they happen to be on at that time. They're there. They're sharing the things that they care about and that are true to them in their space. So we actually, for the Nerd Culture Ministry Summit, we did a lot of local targeting. And what that means is that we spammed a lot of people to tell them that we were having this conference. And so we got some people in one of our videos that messaged us and said, publicly, one of them said, hey, considering about 75% of what goes on in pop culture is against the church, ? This isn't a good thing. This isn't as good a thing as you're thinking. That was the understanding. And I had a couple of people message me about that, and we're like, oh man, what are you going to take that down, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm not going to take that down. Why would I take that down? But I'm not mad at the person that asked me. I'm not mad at the person that said that. I simply move into explain mode, because I think that what happens is a lot of times we get painted into corners as people, as human beings. When somebody asks us a question, it's a very direct question. They want a one-word answer, yes or no. And I think the world's way more nuanced than that. Way more nuanced. How did I get to yes? How did I get to no? Let's go on a journey. So, this is what I said. I said, hey, that's a great point. First off, that's a great point. I acknowledge what you said to be true. While we love the church, we understand that it's not without its shortcomings. Some of them have been widely displayed for all the world to see. But we believe that a major area of growth can happen if properly addressed. Those of us leading the summit love and engage in nerd culture daily. It's where we find rest, fun, and most of our community. And we just don't engage with other people of like faith, but that would be a completely disingenuous way to go about it, and that is not our aim. Again, if we only echo chamber, that's a good way to kind of turn people off as well. We understand, and we want to help people that are in the church understand, that just because someone likes comics, anime, video games, or whatever else, that it doesn't make them unworthy of being loved, cared for, and ascribed the value that they should be. We aim to change that evaluation of nerds from those who so easily judge them, because we are not counting conversions. We don't believe that everyone, or we do believe that everyone is someone to be loved and is worth putting ourselves out there just to say, Jesus loves you, nerd. That's a big deal for us. No talks of hellfire, brimstone, just love. Not being shallow in our approach, but recognizing that people are far more likely to spend time with those that they love than those that they hate. That's kind of a simple understanding that we forget a lot of times. But I'll even add to that, I think a lot of times the people that we talk to about these things, we don't want to see again. And I think that should change too. And we'd like to spend more time with these people. I hope this helps to paint the purpose of the Nerd Culture Ministry Summit for you. We aren't staging an invasion. We are nerds too, and we want to help people build healthy relationships and change the perceptions of Christianity in places where it has earned every nasty look and scoff that it has. I promise that this is more about retaining people of faith, retraining people of faith to look and act more like the Jesus that they love and they're called to. Absolutely no judgment or conversion techniques here. Hey, you can go and watch last year's if you'd like, free of charge. It'll help to frame this whole conversation. But even if you don't, it might be worth keeping an eye on this just so you can see. Love to talk to you later. Her response, my response is this long, right? Her response, wow. All I can say is thank you. I had the best day after that. She went on in another section of that post and actually started to defend other people that were, talking down about this. And I was like, didn't ask you to do that, wild. But because I step into a space and I say, you are right, man. Hey, I love you. I don't know you, but I love you. I invited him, come on out. Probably not here, but I invited him to come on out, It's one of those things where we have to be willing to step into those spaces. So it quickly changed a very, very deep conversation that was hurtful, pain-filled, into an empathetic, loving situation where we could actually see each other as human beings. There are so many outside forces that show people what it means to be a Christian. Friends, as of last week, it got a lot harder to do what we do. I'm not making a political statement. I'm telling you the facts of life. It got a lot harder to show people what true love in Jesus actually looks like. There is a very vivid picture in some people's minds about what it means to be a Christian, and it's inaccurate. It's up to you and I to love people well in those spaces, to say, not what would my friends do, what did my church taught me to do, what did my dad tell me to do, what would Jesus do in that situation? And I'm telling you, he would look them deep in the eyes and he would say, the things that you care about matter because they matter to you and you matter to God. Welcome to the Nerd Culture Ministry Summit. You have now finished the tutorial level and you guys are ready to go out on the main quest.